Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and lordy lord, do we have one for you today. Now, if you're listening to me or following me in any which way, shape, or form, watching this on video, I do highly recommend you actually watch this and not just listen to it, because this is actually a PowerPoint presentation that we are going to go through here today. And this obviously is a huge, huge thing. We are going to be talking about US influencers that were apparently paid by Russian intelligence, although they may not know it. And so you may have heard of this story, but we are going to cut through the speculation and talk only about the facts because, well, quite frankly, if you're a longtime listener and follower, you know that's how I roll. And so first things first, let's talk about the ground rules here. And for the record, this video slash podcast slash everything else is not political. I do not care what you believe, and I like to say that cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we're not immune from it. And so to the extent practicable, this is not about political leanings. Again, I don't care if you love or hate the people I'm talking about. We're going to talk about the facts only. And first things first as well, these are the facts as of today, Thursday, September 5th of 2024, 4 p.m. Central Time, GMT minus 5. And so if anything else comes out or somebody has some presto changeo confession or does something or we get more evidence, obviously it's not going to be here as of that time. On top of this, all sources that I reference in this video, in other words, the words that you're going to see on the screen if you're watching this, or what I'm saying, is coming from top tier sources, including the Department of Justice itself. And so I'm going to go ahead and link all of those in the YouTube video and also the SoundCloud video as well. And so if you are watching this via LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you can go to one of those, YouTube and SoundCloud, and actually get those sources directly. Now, here's what we know about the facts as we know them. And so first things first, on Wednesday, September 4th, the DOJ, the Department of Justice of the United States, released a statement entitled "Justice Department Disrupts Covert Russian Government-Sponsored Foreign Malign Influence Operation Targeting Audiences in the United States." Now, some of the key elements, but not all of them, and we will get to those, are simply this. Essentially, the law enforcement seized 32 internet domains used in Russian government-directed foreign malign influence campaigns. Now, the Russian companies known as Social Design Agency, or SDA, Struktura, National Technology, or simply Struktura, and ANO Dialogue used these domains, among others, essentially to spread Russian propaganda, obviously on behalf of the Russian government. This was also run out of the Russian's President Directorate office, as according to the DOJ, which again, you can read in those links. Now, with that, let's get in a little more to the nuts and bolts of this, because we want to talk about the intent according to the Department of Justice. And first things first, the goal here of Russian intelligence was to reduce international support for Ukraine. As you know, the Russians have invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting back. The three-day war is now almost 1,000 days in. And so by virtue of that, they continuously want to undermine the Ukrainian position, especially as the United States is one of the benefactors in supporting Ukraine in their war by arming them heavily. On top of it, they want to bolster pro-Russian policies and interests around the world. That is a given for absolutely everything they're doing. And of course, influence us in our election, because we are going through a presidential election here in 2024, arguably the most contentious election that we've had possibly since the Civil War, definitely in modern times. So we'll see. That's my opinion on that one for the just so you know, because again, I want to make sure that I'm separating fact from fiction and speculation, and I speculate it is the most contentious election. And so with that, let's talk about how Russian intelligence achieved this, again, according to the charging documents of the DOJ. You can read yourself. So first things first, they used cyber squatting, meaning they were basically sitting on domains. They were fabricating influencers and fake profiles. They were using AI-generated false narratives. They were also using AI to generate fake profiles as well, and they were spreading this across social media. On top of this, their narratives were targeting specific demographics here in the United States, as well as regions, in an effort to subvert our election. We saw the exact same thing from the Internet Research Agency in 2016. That is a fact. You can go to essentially Congress's website and read all 3,600 to 4,000 or so advertisements that Russian intelligence put out, specifically targeting different communities in different geographical locations, or even different communities in the same geographical location. Again, that is fact. And let's keep rolling. On top of it, they published basically Russian government messaging and falsely presented it as content from legitimate news or media organizations. We've seen a whole bunch of these. Basically, it came out prior to this charging document that fake news organizations that look like legitimate newspapers were saying things that, like, Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, was actually buying yachts with the money that the United States was giving to him. That was demonstrably false. His wife bought a Bugatti. That was demonstrably false, all put out by the Russians. And again, you can read about all of this. Don't take my word for it. On top of it, the Russians deployed influencers worldwide. They had paid social media advertisements, and they created social media profiles posing as US or non-Russian citizens to post comments with links that go back to these domains. And those domains would then offer the whatever fake news the Russians wanted everybody to see. Now, the DOJ also identified unnamed companies in the charging documents that were receiving money from these Russian cutouts. And one of these companies that we're going to focus on, because they've hit the news and now it has become fact as they've been identified by various news outlets, is Tenant Media. Now, these are basically, you may be seeing documents, you may be seeing Twitter posts on this. We are going to cut through the noise because I want to talk about exactly what we know in this situation about Tenant Media. Specifically, according to the allegations by the Department of Justice in unsealed indictments, essentially, they are accusing 2 employees of RT. That's Russia Times. That is the media propaganda outlet that was closed down here in the United States due to the war in Ukraine. But 2 employees of RT were funneling nearly $10 million to Company One. The charging documents say Company One. That was ID'd multiple times by basically news outlets from all over the world. And we're going to talk about that because Tenant self-described themselves as a, quote, network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues. Now, that exact language that they used matches the language in the indictment precisely. So, in other words, there you go. Tenant is describing themselves as this in the same way the charging documents are. So that is a key indicator that we are talking about Tenant. On top of it, the alleged Russian operation, tasked 2 people to essentially set up Tenant as a company in their own names, which therefore adds legitimacy. So Tenant was set up, according to the documents, as a Russian operation by these 2 people, and these 2 founders were aware that this was a Russia money-backed operation. In other words, they were fully aware that Tenant was going to be a cutout of Russian intelligence and therefore used for Russian influence. Now, on top of this, the goal of the alleged operation, according to the documents, was to fuel pro-Russian narratives, in part by pushing content and articles favoring presidential nominee Donald Trump. He's running on the Republican ticket, as well as others that the Kremlin deemed friendly to their interests. And so by virtue of that, you've got essentially an influence operation that is putting out demonstrably false information in support of a presidential candidate. And again, I am not getting political here. I do not care if you love or hate Donald Trump. We just have to honestly have these kinds of conversations because this stuff happens all the time, regardless of who is running. But this one obviously is a big one given the contentiousness of this election. Again, not speculation. This is what the charging documents are saying. And so we're going through these allegations. Now, on top of this, the commentators that Tenant Media has are right-wing personalities that would be in line with a right-wing candidate for president. So Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, and Dave Rubin. I did a bit of homework on all of them because they started to react as a result of this. Tenant did confirm that essentially, yeah, this is what we are, because their personalities are now essentially saying they didn't know this. And so let's go through this because they've released statements, and I want to be fair and accurate to the people that I just mentioned. Again, I don't care what your politics are. This is what they actually said. So Tim Pool said in a statement, and I quote, The Culture War podcast, who I assume is his podcast, was licensed by Tenant Media. It existed well before any license agreement with Tenant, and it will continue to exist after any such agreement expires. The only change with the agreement was that the location of the live broadcast moved to Tenant's YouTube channel. End quote. Now, he also added that Poole himself always had full editorial control of the show, and that, quote, we still do not know what is true as these are only allegations, end quote. And what Mr. Poole is saying is basically correct. This is what the DOJ has put out in unsealed indictments, as well as documents from the Southern District of New York. Now, here's the thing about allegations. Allegations can have multiple standards and multiple differentiators. And by virtue of that, I can make an allegation that says my next door neighbor is an axe murderer, okay? I have no evidence, I have no proof, I have nothing to substantiate that, but maybe I hate my next door neighbor, and so I'm calling him an axe murderer. That's defamation. But if the Department of Justice is going to put out these allegations, they're going to have teeth in a way that me calling my neighbor an axe murderer simply won't, because they're going to bring evidence. They're going to have money trails, financial transactions. They're going to have internal communications, all of which should hold up in court. The win rate, for the record, for the federal DOJ in terms of indictment is over 90%. They are very, very thorough. And so while Mr. Poole is correct to say that they are allegations, we have to talk about possibilities and probabilities. Now, the possibility of anything happening is always possible. An asteroid literally could hit the planet as I'm recording this. That is a real possibility. The probability is significantly lower. Odds are we're going to get warnings that say it's the end of the world in 5 days. Nick, don't record the video, right? So understand that. And so while this allegation always has the possibility of being incorrect in some way, shape, or form, the probability lowers, therefore increasing the accuracy, because evidence would be required to charge these people. Now, again, I am not saying that Tim Poole or any of the people that I'm talking about here had any knowledge. They could have been simply duped by Tenant Media. Tenant Media is offering money to them to basically give them a wider audience and pay them, and that's what creators do. And so by virtue of that, he could very well be innocent of this, in other words, unknowing. Now, if obviously evidence comes out, and I'm not saying it will, I do not know, but if evidence comes out where Tim's like, yeah, I'm totally taking money from Putin or something like that, then obviously that changes the game. Again, I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm not saying that will happen. What I'm saying is those are the possibilities, and therefore we have to judge the probabilities. And I do not know what the probability of that happening is. And so with that, let's move on to the next statement. This would be by Benny Johnson. And for the record, I have not seen any of their podcasts or anything like that. If you are a regular follower of them, let me know, but this is just not in my sphere. And for the record, I don't really like listen to podcasts so much as I do like lectures. But anyway, Benny Johnson said he is, quote, disturbed by the allegations in today's indictment, which make clear that myself and other influencers were victims in this alleged scheme, end quote. And again, similar to what Tim Poole said, possibilities and probabilities, and I have to take all of these people at their word because I don't know them and I have no other evidence beyond what the DOJ has essentially released as evidence itself. And with that, let's move on to Dave Rubin, the other one that I mentioned as well. He wrote on social media that he, quote, knew absolutely nothing about any of this fraudulent activity, end quote. And again, that could be a very true statement. I don't know if Tim Poole, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, or any other Tenant personalities had any basically knowledge that they were being paid surreptitiously by the Russian government through this corporation, Tenant Media. So by virtue of that, if you are hearing this online, it is speculation. If somebody is accusing any of these three as being Russian intelligence agents, we don't have actual data on that yet. The DOJ has not come out and said that. The DOJ has been specific, as I've been talking about here, that they set up a corporation, they meaning the Russians set up this corporation to essentially start disseminating this information. Now, whether they had full editorial control or not, according to Tim Poole, he at least did. But again, we'll see what happens over time. But again, don't listen to the speculation. Don't listen to the bias. There are going to be people out there that know these people, that absolutely hate them and absolutely love them, and you're going to see people deride and support them. This is all that we know. That is it. Everything else is speculation. This is the facts because this is what these people have seen now, or rather said. And if they say something different or more evidence comes out later, or if they say something different or change their stories, that's another thing. But as of right now, this is what we know. Now, with that, here are my thoughts and my opinions on this because, again, I'm separating fact from speculation and definitely from fiction. So first things first, I am never a fan of these things. I am not a fan. The whole influencer thing itself, outside of like the Russians or whoever, I absolutely hate. But any foreign government attempting to influence any foreign government, including the US, doing it to others, and Lord knows we have a long history of that, but that's not an excuse. And so by virtue of it, I'm not a fan of any of this whatsoever. These are the things that the Facebooks of the world really need to basically have vast safety and trust teams for. So they are sniffing these things out, looking through these things. We also have to have our own sharp, keen eye over these kinds of things, where if, you know what, somebody really sounds like they love Putin, maybe it's not just a coincidence, you know. And again, I don't know any of the influencers, or rather the personalities, if you will, on Tenet. All I know is what I'm reading. On top of it, we are living through deeply divided times, United States. If you're a longtime listener, follower of mine, you know I've talked about that continuously. And again, cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we are not immune from it. And by virtue of that, disinformation is at a level that we've never seen. It's been bad. It's been continuing to grow, but the free and open platforms that we have in the YouTubes, the podcasts, the social media that we have out there has really allowed this to thrive in a way that quite frankly, we shouldn't let it. And I'm willing to bet that this is also the tip of the iceberg. Tenant Media is probably, you know, one of many out there, and others are getting paid surreptitiously through American cutouts that are pro-Russian or something. Again, my speculation, but given all that's going on, I can't believe it start and stops with one single influence operation, and the charging documents from the DOJ back me up on that. On top of it, I think this is creating those two separate realities. And that is the intent of our adversaries, to create two ecosystems, two different realities where you can say, well, I have alternative facts, when quite frankly, facts should simply be facts. And again, if you're a longtime listener and follower, that's literally why I am ringing this bell continuously through this video slash podcast, because quite frankly, we have to cut through the noise. On top of it, thanks to things like confirmation bias, something I've talked about constantly, you're going to believe what best fits what you think. So if you're on the right, you're going to think maybe this is BS. If you're on the left, you're going to think, you know what? They're all guilty of treason. The truth, odds are, is somewhere in the middle, which is why you have to look at essentially the hyperbole that is coming from both sides, whether it's a staunch defense or a staunch torching of the individual, or Tenant Media in this case. You know, the facts will come out, the evidence will come out, and they've got compelling evidence, which makes the probability that this is really bad really, really high on the probability list. You know, in the same way I'm judging their statements based on that framework. But we've got to make sure that we are understanding that we have confirmation bias and cutting through that noise. And for the record, I gotta shout out to the Russians here in the most negative way, because they really did drop a supercharger into this kind of stuff. I mean, they've been using political partisans since they were the Soviets back in the day, but with basically all of this combined followers of these influencers, whether they knew or not that they were taking Russian money and spreading Russian propaganda in some subtle way, because he never hit it over the head. Like, everybody, let's go march down Red Square waving flags. No, it's subtle, incremental bits of information that move the ball forward to push people further on the political spectrum, all the way to radicalization and extremism. And so this is a huge thing. And the Russians have been very good at it, to the detriment of everybody else. And so it's something that just absolutely drives me up a wall. Now, on top of it, this is why we need to get on the same page with facts. I've been talking about this for the last couple of minutes, but a fact is a fact. There's a fact that there's a charging document out there. It is a fact that the Department of Justice has evidence. It is a fact that the defense will go through the evidence and build a defense, either based on the actual facts. And if they cannot dispute the facts, then they build a defense on the law itself. That is essentially how that works. But the facts are the facts. This is what has been found. This is what financial transactions say. There's a huge vetting process for this. And the reason why the judiciary system is separate from the Department of Justice in terms arms of the three branches of government is essentially to make sure that the prosecutors are checked by not just the judges, but also by the juries as well. And so, again, this is all going to come out to bear because, as always, we have to have patience. The truth will eventually come out. And if you hear somebody screaming from the rooftops, again, in defense or prosecution of any of this situation, take a step back. The facts will come out. This will be adjudicated, and here we are. But this is such an important one that I wanted to do basically a presentation on this because, again, I want to cut through the noise and just stick to the facts, and speculation or opinion is clearly labeled as it always should be. And with that, thank you as always for watching. Please subscribe to me. I can always use the followers on YouTube and SoundCloud and any of my social media that you see here because, once again, just cutting through the noise, sticking to the facts, and as always, not a fan of Russian intelligence. There you go. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private and make sure you stick to the facts. Take care, all.